Good evening, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in with us this afternoon. My name is Elizabeth de Souza, and it is my great pleasure to help present the work of Donald E. Camp, an internationally recognized artist, photographer, and a professor of photography, who, as I was explaining to my colleagues here, has more awards and fellowships than I have hairs on my head. So three that come to mind immediately is the Guggenheim Fellowship and the National Endowment of the Arts Fellowship, and also the Pew Fellowship. And those are just three. We also have the pleasure of having his work presented to us this evening through the lens of another artist named Lloyd Lawrence, who is an interdisciplinary artist. And both of the artists are graduates of the Tyler School of Art, which is very interesting to have two artists that attended these schools at different times. And they're both African-American artists. And the work that we're looking at this evening is part of a longer ongoing conversation that I've been privileged to be a part of about this body of work that is called Dust-Shaped Hearts. And the presentation that we have prepared this evening, or that was prepared by Lloyd Lawrence, is his exploration of the work of Donald Camp. And it's been a fascinating journey, and we're happy to welcome you into that journey. And the presentation that we will show is going to include the conversation that has been happening around the creation of this presentation. So in other words, this presentation will be shown here at ABS, but it's part of a longer and larger conversation about Donald Camp's work and also about the work of the African-American artists. So with no further ado, I would like the film to begin, and we will be watching it for a while, and there will be certain times that we will pause in order to bring you into the conversation that's been happening behind the scenes about this piece of work. And did I also say that Lloyd Lawrence was a student of Sonia Sanchez in poetry, and he also graduated from the Tyler School of Art, and he studied art also under Jacob Lawrence. Sorry, Lloyd, didn't mean to leave that out.
No problem.
Okay, so whenever we're ready, we will begin the film presentation. I wanted to start with why those images of the barbershop had significance.
Is that for me or for Lloyd? Because
that's for you.
That's for me. Well, I grew up in a barber shop. My father was a barber. It's the place where I saw the photograph of Emmett Till. I sold Jet magazine. My father gave me childhood lessons, and so when I turned 13, I was expected to go to work in the barber shop. And so I started learning to cut hair and sweep up hair and shine shoes and run the register and sell the magazine and turn them in. In other words, he was teaching me business. But I also heard the conversations. And this is the thing about a barbershop, a beauty parlor. I think all around the world, it's the place where you talk. It's the place where you exchange information. And that was the place where I heard the stories of the soldiers, because this was post-World War II, and there were still a lot of soldiers at that time suffering from what was then called shell shock, and now it's post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, I heard the anger over Emmett Till. I heard people say the boy should have known better. I heard people say enough is enough. We need to change this. Um, I myself, that was where I began to learn about the world. So the barbershop is very, very important to us.
And you said something that was crucial that I'm not sure was captured. When you were speaking about, well, let's go back to, there was an image of Muhammad Ali getting a haircut.
Ah,
And I know that you had an exchange with Muhammad Ali, and it involved a discussion of the Emmett Till image, which is so disturbing and aroused so much emotion and change and was part of the civil rights movement, the launch of the civil rights movement. Could you talk a little about that encounter with
sure.
Muhammad Ali?
Yeah, I had the chance to go up to Deer Lake, and I was photographing, actually, I was photographing Veronica Porsche, and the new baby of Ali. And I mean, you can't photograph Veronica Porsche without photographing Muhammad Ali. You can't photograph anybody around Muhammad Ali without photographing Muhammad Ali. And I was fortunate enough to be sitting across from him at the table, the lunch table. And I always ask a black man when I'm photographing, what did you do when you heard about Emmett Till? Anyone of the appropriate age, what did you do? And Ali looked, he says, we got a group of kids and we just went out and broke windows. We broke car windows. And he was a fighter. John Lewis and the recent Sunday New York Times sent him a letter to be published on his death. And he spoke about Emmett Till and the effect that it had on him. And he woke up also, and he became a fighter. Um, but it had two different effects. Some of us, it woke up. Some of us, it put us to sleep. I couldn't bear anymore. And so I just didn't see a future, and I went to sleep. I went from being a straight A student to being a just marginal student. I was retained in seventh grade. Um, so that was the effect it had on me. And it took me decades to wake up.
Can you tell us what were the things, and I know that you shared some of this with us, what were the things that stimulated that reawakening?
The the main thing that did it, there's several things that happened um, that I thought I was awake. But the main thing was where you saw the drumming. And that was at a black men's gathering. And there was a point where, at this point, there was 16 of us, 16 Baha'i black men. And we met in South Carolina. And it was the first time I had been in a group of black men like that. And I didn't realize it at the time, but until then, and at that time, for the first couple of days, I realized I was afraid of black men. I was afraid of myself. I'd looked at those headshots in newspapers, I'd looked at all the stories of who we were, and I believed them. And so when I got around these other men and I found out who they were, when we started laughing together, honestly, when we cried together, I never cried in front of a black man, would never do that. But others cried too. We cried and we laughed and we prayed and we decided what we were going to do with our lives. And some of the men, I mean, they were doctors and lawyers and professors, and these were people I wanted to be. And it was the first time I had seen us like that. And it was then that I decided, it's just that what was shortly after that, I started searching for a way of changing that visual image of who we are.
Lloyd, is there something that you wanted to ask? I have 8,052 questions, but for the sake of our audience, um, is there
Can
anything?
you hear me?
I
Well,
hear
can
you.
you hear me well?
I hear you well.
My phone is sputtering. Well, I wanted to do this collaboration with Don because I see it as being more than a collaboration. A collaboration would be a little bit more easier than what I thought I took on because I would describe it as wanting to collaborate with Don Soul via his artwork because the work spoke to me. And I wanted to know what's behind it, because we have a shared history, obviously, on so many levels, whether it's cultural, social, political, spiritual, aesthetic, and how would I take his imagery and and deconstruct it, twist it around, bring it back again, and find a different meaning in it beyond the one he gave to it. So I was very excited to be able to do this quote unquote collaboration. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there were a couple of there were a couple of points that I found particularly beautiful, and that was the beginning, um, the just before the barbershop when you came in for me with as a little boy, and the dance. That was absolutely beautiful because that's what I felt. I thought the way that you worked with the image of Emmett Till, because the image of Emmett Till is a mirror. And I was wondering how you were going to handle that because in most cases, it's only a two-dimensional piece. But in reality, it's a three-dimensional real-time piece. And your solution for showing that in video, I thought was really ingenious. And the fact that you used the reflection of a poet in the mirror. Because in a sense, that's the reality you get when you stand in front of the mirror.
There were so many really powerful and beautiful moments in the dialogue between Lloyd and Don. And one of them, I'm picking amidst many of them, but one of them was a story about someone who had encountered your work. I believe he was a valet car, was he a driver?
No, no, this was a case of, yeah, and this is, it's so interesting because the last man speaking, he spoke of being somebody. We are somebody. And I was parking my car, and it was one of those places where you have to sign your car in to make sure that you're going to the office that you're going to and get your little thing stamped and bring it out and bring it to the person who's taking care of the parking area. And you have to sign in. And so I pulled into the parking lot. I went over and I signed the book. And the parking attendant looked at it and he said, "Are you Don Camp, the artist?" And I was pleased, it's nice to be recognized as an artist. And yes, I am. And he smiled and he says, "I love what you do. You make me feel like someone." And that's all I really want my work to do. That was the purpose of it, was to make someone feel like someone, to make like someone feel noble.
And I found it very illuminating that with all of the places that you have lectured, with the major institutions that hold your work, and all of those accolades, I have to say that in our conversations, those did not come up as the meaningful. I know that they have great meaning, but what came up was this person who said to you, "You make me feel like someone." And I found that extremely moving and very meaningful. And I was wondering, how does it feel to see your work that you've poured so much energies in being interpreted by another artist strictly through the work?
Terrifying. um, I mean, there were a couple of it's very interesting. I mean, there were a couple of places that I was in violent disagreement with what the interpretation, and there were a couple of places that I thought were just I don't know how he did it. He caught me, and it wasn't it wasn't an image of me. It was something that I felt inside of me. Um, as I mentioned earlier, the dance in the beginning, as I was talking about, uh, and that just he interpreted a feeling of me, you know, and so yeah, it's really fascinating. It's not I've had other people do something like that, um, but it's always kind of a picture of me, and I make a huge difference between a picture or of me and a piece of art about me. I make a difference between taking a photograph and making a photograph. It's very easy to take a photograph. It's very difficult to make a photograph.
I'm getting text messages from people who want to know, people who are watching and want to know if there's a particular place you would direct them to look at your artwork or to be able to, sorry, I'm fortunate to have this, but what about others?
Well, what you're holding in your hand is always available on Amazon.
Okay.
And if you Google Donald E. Camp, there'll be several places that you'll be able to see the work that I'm doing. Don't Google Don Camp or Donald Camp there because there are three photographers out there, and we kind of had an online battle as to who was going to be who. And so I just finally became Donald E. The other one who's very good is Donald, and then there's a Don who's new. So,
We've got good, very good, and ta-da! Lloyd, who was do you know from where that dancer, the dancer that you used during the portion that Don was speaking, who is that dancer and where did you get that footage?
That is Ishmael Houston Jones. He is a staple of the downtown dance scene since the 1980s. And he's still going strong. When the art scene here was a little bit more fluid and everyone knew each other, although he's from Philadelphia.
oh, yeah.
Although I was in school, he was here in New York having a professional career, and we had mutual friends. And so whenever I could, I would follow his work because he's self-taught. That's another thing. He's always been on the scene, but he's one of the few self-taught dancers out there that made it. You know what I'm saying? And so when I saw that piece, the piece is called Them. And I was wondering whether or not I could get it to actually work with that section, and I wasn't sure. And the first time I placed Don's audio on it, the middle part just hit perfectly. And I was shocked. I said, God is in the house. Because once the middle hit, I knew I could get the beginning to hit.
Well, it worked beautifully. You know, that's how the Emmett Till piece came about in a bit. Um, the Emmett Till piece came about as two separate pieces, even though they were originally in the newspaper, and they're appropriated images, quite small, in the newspaper. And that flag was for some reason put next to Emmett Till. So when I did it, but I separated it because I only wanted the Emmett Till piece. I wanted to do this piece, this mirror piece on Emmett Till. And that is the reason I wanted to do it on mirror, because of the prayer, the part of the prayer is thus their superstitions have become barriers between themselves and their own hearts. And I wanted to place something as a barrier between self and self. And so that was how the reason for using the mirror. use something, a photo sensitive material on the surface of the mirror as a barrier between seeing self and self. And there was a mysterious thing. It was it was when I printed the Emmett Till piece, for some reason, it wouldn't dry horizontal. Those pieces were very fragile when they were wet, and I always placed them in a horizontal position to dry. And after 2 or 3 days, this one just would not dry. So I figured I'd put it vertical so that it would kind of dry in a different way. And next morning when I came up, much of that image had run to the bottom of the image, the bottom of the glass. And I thought, this is Emmett Till. The flag, I actually have no reason to have it exist. I liked it as a piece, but it said nothing other than it was a flag. Um, so as I was working, when I closed down my dark room and I put things out of the way, and I happened to place the Emmett Till piece next to the flag, and I walked away. Next morning, when I went back to my dark room, I saw that they were side by side, and they worked beautifully as diptychs. So that was how Emmett Till was born. So yeah, there's these graces that are given when we allow space for the work to happen.
I have a comment and a question that's coming in from our audience. The comment is that it's very interesting that the protein that you work with is white, and yet it reveals the face of a Black man. And it goes on to comment that soul has no color. And I find that comment very provocative as well, because when I finally, at long last, began to get deep into the Baha'i writings and found out that my soul was in fact not the soul of a Black woman, two portions of my identity that have impacted me tremendously, being in the world as a woman and being in the world as a Black woman, that in fact my soul was elevated above any designation that we would have here on this earthly plane. So thank you for that comment that's coming in, and which links to so many of the discussions that we have had as well, even concerning subject matter and what you would like to work on and what you have worked on. But I just want to see, one of the questions here is, how did support from family help both of you to realize your vision as creatives? That's the question I'm looking at here.
Lloyd?
You want to take that, Don?
No, you take that one.
It's really, really important that you do have some kind of support. Whatever you're calling family, that'll be able to support you as an artist, because the world is a very unforgiving place for an artist, because right now we really don't know how to use an artist to the best effect. Right now, we think an artist is someone you call in to fill in a blank. And maybe that would have been good, 2 decades removed. But as the world grow and develop, our relationship to artists need to grow and develop. And somehow, for the most part, I don't think that has occurred. And so, we have institutions in the past that try to piecemeal and support artists, but because of, the political climate, we don't think we should be doing that. So the only ones out there that will support artists in their need are their families and friends. And without that, so buy art.
Well, I, on the other hand, had no option. I am the youngest child of 7, and I have 6 artists that preceded me. So I tried to escape it. I just did not want to be like my siblings. And then I took a test, an aptitude test. And it was, I mean, it really was a serious body of aptitude test. And it came back saying, you know, you're really creative, but you're not really adaptable to do anything. So it was like I had no option. I mean, I could have gone into labor. I mean, I could have just, you know, gone to labor or learned a craft or something. But I took it as saying, okay, this thing says that I'm really creative. I don't know how this test knows this, but yeah, I'm an artist. I'm from that family of artists. You know, musicians and painters and woodworkers, and you know, that's what I am. And so all I had to do was define what my art was to be. And I knew that musically, I couldn't be uh, better than the pianist in my family, who was just absolutely brilliant. I couldn't be better than the wood sculptor in my family, who was absolutely brilliant. You know, I couldn't be better than the painter in my family. You know, I had those things. I couldn't outdo them. And so I had to find my own way of doing it. And so I found photography, but somehow in the back of my mind, photography as it existed was not doing what I wanted it to do. It was a very neutral surface. It was not, it wasn't Jimmy Reed. You know, I wanted blues, I wanted a field holler. And so I decided that I would work with earth pigment and casein. It was an old formula that it was mentioned in some little paragraph in a book written in 1880 or something. And I decided that I would give that a try. And I found out one other photographer had tried it and didn't like it because it was um, not as neutral as they wanted it to be. But for me, it was beautiful because it was like jazz. It was like blues. It was this wonderful surface I could work with.
There are so many fascinating things there. And one of the people watching wants to know why you choose to work with the full frontal face, why you don't do profile.
Headshots. The photographs I saw when I was a kid of those that always depicted black criminals, they were headshots, full frontals. When I worked for the newspaper, I was the first thing that we would get on anyone, no matter who it was. We got a headshot, full frontal. Could be getting someone who just got this wonderful promotion, and we needed a headshot for future promotions, or if they robbed a bank. And so that was a headshot. It's this kind of the basics of a newspaper. You're going to see headshots, and so I wanted to use that as the constant because my work surface is so variable. It's so um, it's multi-surfaced, and because of the variations and the differences on the surface, I needed something to hold that all together. And so therefore, I use the frontal view of the face. That's the constant. The head level, the eyes always on the level. It's just straight ahead. And then that allowed me to really play with the shadows and the light and the skin texture and where the paper could come through and all of that without worrying about what the shape of the head was in a sense.
Lloyd, did you have something you wanted to add? I'm thinking about the question that we presented to Don concerning the events that are happening now.
Hmm.
Do you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, considering you came of age during the time of Emmett Till, and we have so many young brothers being pulled down. And I asked, were you going to continue to do series of works uh, based on the catastrophe that occurred with young black men in America?
Um, it's a difficult question to answer without sounding harsh, but I don't want to. Um, you keep things happen in life to things have happened to me in life as a black man, and you just kind of you get up and you get up and you get up again and you get up again and you keep getting up. And after a while, you're just tired and you realize that someone who was your age when you started this is going to do it. And I don't know how to fight at this moment. The battleground, in a sense, the battle has changed. The battleground has changed. This is the new format. I don't know how really to use this format, but it's a powerful format, and I know it can be used to change things. Um, right now, I want to rest a bit. I want to kind of enjoy some other things in life. Um, I spent a long time just really um, working longer than I should have. And some of the times that meant I neglected things that I should not have neglected. And so right now, I am enjoying time being with my wife when this pandemic is over, whatever it is. But a couple of years ago, I started enjoying being with my grandchildren. I'm enjoying being with people. I'm enjoying quiet moments. I'm enjoying reading. Um, and I keep saying that I really should go back and do some more work. And then again, I don't really want to go back and work. Now, I imagine someday it will interest me again. Some big question will come up in my head that I have to answer on paper. Um, maybe not so big, maybe just important. Um, you know, but right now, I mean, I'm doing little books, little 8 inch by 8 inch, pretty little books that are kind of uh, photographs of nothing that I make something. And I love that for the moment. I'm tired of being forced to stand up.
You said to us when we were speaking, when this question came up, you said George Floyd is this generation's.
Yeah,
My generation's was Emmett Till. And you also said you were tired of singing the blues. And I found that a very powerful statement because the blues have been tremendously important for so many African American artists and other artists of other backgrounds as well. And yet, there is a time when the soul is seeking the freedom of expression and not bound by having to interpret these oppressions.
yeah. I mean, I just expressed the love for the blues. Um, I wanted my Prince to look like Jimmy Reed. You can't get more blues than Jimmy Reed. Um, but there comes a time when you sit back and you listen to Jimmy Reed and you realize he was beautiful, but he was singing stuff that was going to make you get up and do something. And this is the important thing about blues. The blues really is when you listen to the lyrics, it really is something to make you uh, get up and do something about yourself, to change something. If you don't do anything else but change the woman that you love, get her out, move away, or make yourself a better person. It's about change. Um, but it's also about earth. And this is what I love about the blues. It's about earth. It came from farmers. It came from field hands. You know, it's earthy. It's not pretentious. It's beautiful.
Don, it seems like your life has been a life of discovery. You went to Paris to find out that you were an American, and you went to the BMG to find out that you were Black. What have you discovered lately?
Ah, you want to hear about the Paris event, or should we leave them in mystery?
No, I mean, yeah, we
We're gonna
all
leave
are
it.
on that road, you know.
Okay, we'll leave that in mystery. Um, what have I discovered lately? Um, I have discovered how to make a really good jambalaya for one. And no, it's interesting because when we look at the history of food in this country, it's you don't realize how much Black people are responsible for what everyone in this country eats. And so to be able to make a good jambalaya is not that easy. And so, that's kind of one thing, something so very, very simple. Um, what challenges me? I just turned 80 a few days ago. Uh, so there's, 80 years old, there's a lot of challenges, sometimes just being able to stand up. And I feel good when I stand up in the morning. Um, but just recently, we got a letter from our Universal House of Justice. And in it says, Don, you really can't rest. You really have to do something because the earth is not as you want it to be yet or what it's supposed to be yet. And you have the ability to do something. So I'm somewhat learning to use Zoom because it's opened up tremendous opportunities to be able to speak with people around the world. So far, I'm just reaching out to California, as far as California and Georgia and Florida. But yeah, and there's tremendous opportunity to share experiences. And so I think maybe that's a challenge. That's the challenge, is to be able to respond to that letter that we all just received.
I think it might be worthwhile also to talk about when we're talking about your art and also Lloyd's interpretation, the things that Lloyd wanted to zoom in on and to emphasize and to play with in your work. There was an image, that caused so much upheaval and controversy and pain and action, which was the image of Emmett Till. And to share with our audience, as we were looking at what Lloyd had selected, we had we would still be talking about it now if not for time limitations. We had a conversation about, is it appropriate and how do we feel about having those images that most people in the Black community have always been familiar with, whether we wanted to or not, and how in this time period, we have today's version of those images, but there's a whole group of people who have never been exposed to those images and never had to ask themselves, should I look or should I not look? And I was saying that I, for example, never look at any disturbing image concerning anything, and particularly concerning African Americans who have been subjected to violence. I will read everything, and I get very upset if the video starts to play and I didn't ask it to. I have chosen not to view those things because of my great sensitivity, or I think, I don't want to put it like I'm so sensitive, I don't want to look at them. However, I do understand the importance that they've played. And Lloyd, we had a whole discussion going on between the three of us about what should we do? Should we include it? Should we not include it? And what we came up with was to give people an option to look away. Would you two like to describe some of the perspectives that we explored?
Lloyd, you muted.
Jump in, Lloyd.
I realize a lot of Dr. Penn described me as a disruptor. And I've never heard that before, but I guess that was quite accurate. Only because in my own life, I was a great fan of Richard Pryor because I really appreciated his brute honesty. And I think there is a place for that. You know, I'm cognizant of what I'm showing and its difficulty and the difficulty it will cause the viewer, but I'm also weighing out the need to deal with difficulty and to be able to see things that are difficult, to be able to get beyond it, you know, as part of healing. Is when I thought about Don and the portraits, and I thought about that horrible image of Emmett Till, I wanted to make it a portrait, a literal portrait. But I knew that somewhere, this is not the project for that, but I can feel that this project made me feel that. And also you have to be respectful of other people who don't have your, you know, your strength. And so part of being an artist to be able to give people strength. So how much can you give them before they recoil, as opposed to seeing it and are able to digest it? So you're always riding on that line, and great artists are the ones that are able to ride that line well and give us a new vision. I mean, that's what I see in Don's portraits. This is a whole nother way of looking at a Black man. It's very interesting. Um, you know, the poem, what is it, 22 Ways to Look at a Black Man? And I think Don has given us another way of doing that, you know.
It's also important
He described his portraits as being in your face, and I never saw that at all. I never saw his portraits as being, I just saw them as being very strong. You know, the way that we see ourselves, even if we don't talk to other people about that.
And it was significant that it was Emmett Till's mother who wanted that picture to be made public. And it's also significant that in Black neighborhoods, there were posters with that image that were tacked up. You could not avoid that image. I've spoken to many African-American visual artists who emerged from that time period, and the commonality, they will say, I saw the image of Emmett Till, and then this happened. And they will say what happened to them. I mean, this is a common thread. And yet, there are many, many, many people who have never heard that name, who never heard the name Emmett Till, who didn't know all that that signified and meant and how it impacted. And when you saw that image, Don, you said that you went to sleep.
Right.
And you said also at some point that you realized you were looking at what could happen to you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that was the danger. That was the power of that particular incident. You know, I mean, we'd heard of lynchings in Western Pennsylvania, and they were, but he was 15 years old, and I was 15 years old, and he was just absolutely brutalized. Um, and then there was this 2-hour trial. And then Look magazine paid the killers for their story. So, it was just this terrible idea that this was justice. This was another example of justice. Um, so the soldiers, the ex-soldiers, the veterans, and the older men they're the ones who really got, I mean, they were visibly upset or dismissive. The boy should have known better, or enough is enough. We 15-year-olds, 16, 14 years old, it was another thing. That was our life. And I unfortunately had a couple terrible things happen to me a few years earlier. And in that particular year, um, I mean, there was a moment, for example, that was right close to the Emmett Till murder, right after it, in which a teacher kept me after class and told me, look, came to the window and pointed to a little black dog in the street and told me that I was no better than that little black dog. And so you add that together, and having lost my mother just close, 2 years, within 2 years, all of that is a terrible thing to pile on a 14-year-old. So yeah, I went to sleep, and I became well, I was a disruptor in a sense in that way, but kind of I was never bad that I got into a lot of bad trouble. Um, and I kind of held back from that, but I caused a fair amount of trouble because I was angry. I was hurt.
I want to dwell a little bit or talk a little bit about the significance of the Black Men's Gathering. In the description for this presentation, we included a question. Why would African American men seclude themselves in order to pray in Baha'i-inspired devotional gatherings, of which other people were also invited who were not part of the Baha'i community? First of all, why was that important? And why would the Universal House of Justice give their stamp of approval to this gathering that began as an individual initiative and grew to tremendous proportions? And we did have some footage of that in the film, but this brings together, as a Baha'i, someone who is immersed in the writings and who that is influencing obviously your artistic output. Would you talk a little bit, both of you, about the significance of the Black Men's Gathering, as well as the ambivalence that many people felt about that gathering? People who had not been in that gathering, I should say, not people who...
Yeah. Well, what I just described earlier, um, I don't think I know I'm not alone in that feeling. I'm not alone in those things happening in life. And
Oh, some feedback from you, Lloyd. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
and so I think Dr. Roberts, Billy, knew that this was a way that we could be healed. He was smart enough to know that this was a way that we could heal. And the Universal House of Justice knew that this was a way that some folks who could do something in the faith could heal and move forward. So yeah, that's why it was necessary. Um, so yeah, I mean, to me, that's just a simple answer. Um, it was that Billy and the Universal House of Justice saved some lives and made some lives and, um, woke me up, woke a group of us up because, we had something to offer. We just needed to be awakened so that we could put it into work.
And you said that when you came back, your wife asked you after, when are you going back to that gathering again?
Yeah, that was the thing. Are you going back next year? Are they going to do it again?
Yes.
So obviously, there was a change that I had gone through. And it was an important change for my family. It was an important change for her. And I think about it, I must have been a pretty miserable person to be around. Well, maybe not really miserable. But
Well, if truth be told, a lot of women got a lot of black men to come to the gathering. Even if those men did not recognize the difficulties that they had in themselves, the women in their lives did.
yeah,
And they made sure that a whole lot of those men and did ask that question, are you going back?
yeah,
Because we recognize the development here and we would like for you to continue
yeah,
that level of growth.
yeah. I was not the only one. Yeah, no, there were a lot.
There's a question that's coming in as well that says, in the presentation, there was a conversation about how men have to also embrace what has traditionally been thought of as feminine qualities. There was some type of allusion to that in the film. And I guess maybe we could ask Lloyd, since you put those images together, could you share more about those ideas and why it seemed that was, I don't remember if it was right before the Black Men's Gathering or right after, but what is the relationship? Why was that in the film? Explain yourself, Lloyd.
Yeah, you know, this is a homophobic society. And so men are supposed to be a certain kind of way. And as corny as that is, we men fall into that trap. And so, the more feminine qualities like compassion, we are not allowed to express those things. Society does not allow us to express those aspects of ourselves. And we take that on like religion. And so when I was talking to Dawn, I said, this is the kind of thing I wanted to address. And so I took that sample. It was Bill T. Jones. And he was talking about having women in him. And it's just a metaphor. He said he got all kinds, and they do this, and they're strong, and the woman in me, she loves the man in me. And basically, we're just talking about being whole. That's all we're talking about, being whole. Because we had this whole toxic masculinity thing that was going on, and I was working with a whole lot of young Black and brown poets at the time. And they all thought they were the hardest things in the world. And I was like, well, what are you going to do with that? That's good if you're playing a role. But once we start getting into reality, that's only part of yourselves. And I think that was one of the other things that the gathering was to address, because when these men got together, they could express more of themselves than the world would allow.
Yeah.
There's another question here. This is a question for Lloyd about being a disruptor. What is the role of the Baha'i artist who is taking on that disruptor role, but also understanding that we are supposed to be a source of unity? That's what the question is. That we also have that we are also supposed to promote unity.
Well, you can disrupt disunity. I mean, you can look at the word as a negative term, but I don't. Because when we go out into our society and it's doing what it's doing, what do you think Baha'is do? We can get beautiful terms to it, but we're out there to make the world better. We're out there to unify the world. In order to do that, you have to do something before you do that. You have to disrupt what's there. And I think we tend to not want to do that part of the work. Yes. We think we can jump from 1 to 1,000. And somewhere between 1 and 1,000, there are a whole lot of numbers. And those numbers are messy numbers. And those numbers might have a name on them called disruptors. And I think the sooner we can, get with the idea that the work is not always pretty, not always beautiful, but it's very, very rewarding if you're going to deal with the reality of it and not just the part that we want to do because we are comfortable with doing that part of the work.
You can't jump to heaven happily ever after.
Yeah.
Well, Baha'u'llah wrote that justice must be established to have unity. And so, that idea of getting justice, you have to disrupt the injustice. It's no interrupter of unity because we're not there yet. But the path, there are many things on the path that need to be disrupted.
And this is the recent letter that we've had. These are some of the conversations around that letter. What are we doing? I think that's a wonderful and perfect note to end on. If there's a closing remark that I like what you just said as the closing remark, but if there's anything additional, we can add it now because we will close this session. And we're so grateful for everyone that tuned in. Any last word?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, friends.